Gestalt platform, helping you future-proof your applications. Hey, this is John with Galactic. Today I'd like to show you how to use the Gestalt platform to manage different containers as service solutions and how to migrate containers between Kubernetes and DCOS. I'll also demonstrate how migration works together with Gestalt policy and our serverless engine, Gestalt Laser. Okay, so let's go ahead and log on to Gestalt platform. First, we'll need to switch our organizational context to Galactic Capital Corporation. Then within Galactic Capital Corporation, we'll select the Equity Division's workspaces, then the Equity Division application workspace, and its production environment. I'll talk a little bit more about organizational context and role-based access control in a separate demo. So in the production environment, you'll notice the Provider tab. Providers allow us to point to external services or to define a new or custom service provider type. Gestalt platform already has a number of bundled provider types, but for the purposes of this demo, we have a provider pointing to our DCOS service and another pointing to our Kubernetes service. And if we take a look at the Kubernetes configuration, you'll see here that it's just a YAML file with our connection parameters to our Kubernetes environment. And if we take a look at the DCOS configuration, it's just a URL pointing to our DCOS environment with some basic authentication. All right, let's do something interesting. Let's head over to our Containers tab. We're going to go ahead and deploy two new containers, one container on DCOS and another container on Kubernetes. To deploy a container, we'll select the Deploy Container button, and we'll deploy a container on DCOS first. We'll call that container Web DCOS. We'll use our Nginx image, and we'll select the bridge network. Below, you'll notice some additional properties that we can define, such as port mappings, volumes, variables, and labels. When deployed on Gestalt platform, the settings here on DCOS will mean the same things on Kubernetes. All right, we'll go ahead and deploy this container, and while that container is deploying, we'll go ahead and deploy our Kubernetes container. We'll call that Web Kubernetes. We'll use the same Nginx image, and we'll select the default network and deploy. Great, so in a few short moments, you'll notice that both our containers will be up and running. So if we refresh our Kubernetes dashboard, you'll see that we have a Kubernetes container. And in our DCOS dashboard, you'll see the Web DCOS container in here as well. All right, let's do something else. Let's go ahead and migrate our Web DCOS container over to Kubernetes Cluster 3 and our Web Kubernetes container over to default DCOS. To do that, we'll select the container actions for Web DCOS and select the migrate action. So we're going to move Web DCOS over to Kubernetes and hit the migrate button. And while that's happening, we'll go ahead and do the same thing for our Kubernetes container, and we'll move that over to DCOS. So you'll notice here in a few short moments that the providers will change for each of these containers. You notice that Web Kubernetes is now on default DCOS, and Web DCOS is now on Kube Cluster 3, and that only took a few seconds. And if we refresh our Kubernetes dashboard, you'll see that now Web DCOS is the container that's deployed. And on our DCOS dashboard, you'll notice now that the container there is Web Kubernetes. Now let's briefly go over how that works in Gestalt platform using policy and our serverless engine Laser. In the Policy tab, you'll see that we've defined a migration policy. The migration policy consists of a migration handler event rule. That event rule contains an event named Container Migration Pre, which is triggered anytime we trigger the migration event from the user interface or from the API. And this event policy references a Lambda by its UUID. In this case, for our environment, this Lambda is located in a higher level environment in Galactic Capital Corporation. And if we navigate to that Lambda, the default migration Lambda, which is referenced by our previous policy, we'll see here that the Lambda is just pointing to a package URL, which is basically just a JavaScript file sitting on our CDN. And since orchestration is really just a Lambda, you can use Laser to either write your own custom migration Lambda in any supported language that you want, or simply use our built-in migration Lambda. So that's our demo showing how you can use the Gestalt platform to migrate between different container as a service solutions. I also demonstrated how we leverage Laser's serverless engine and policy to orchestrate migration.